All right, I believe we are live.
That's what it says.
Awesome. So, welcome everyone. I am Regan Starks. I am the program director of the Baseball Heritage Museum, and I'm so very excited about this. I have Terry Pluto, legendary Cleveland sports writer, here, and he's agreed to do an interview with us. So, I guess my first question is, everyone seems to know your history, but just to reiterate, what is your history and how did you get to where you are today as, the Cleveland sports writer?
Well, I lived a long time. That helps. Number two, I worked here a long time. I think there's a huge advantage to growing up in the area
Mm-hmm.
where you end up writing sports. And I say that because I didn't always work in Cleveland. My early jobs were first one full time was in Greensboro, North Carolina,
Yeah.
then Savannah, Georgia, and then Baltimore before Cleveland. And
Mm-hmm.
while I enjoyed those places, Reagan, the thing that struck me, it's like when my friends at the Greensboro paper, I remember we were covering the ACC tournament, which was a bigger deal back then in basketball than now because it wasn't like 64 teams made, it was like 24. So you wanted to win the tournament in that. And they all were from the Carolinas. They were either Duke fans or Carolina fans or even Wake Forest.
Mm-hmm.
Who do you like? Who do you like? I'm like, well, really none of these schools. I like basketball, and it was fun to watch them. And I got to interview Dean Smith and these
Mm-hmm.
other people, but it was nothing like when the Indians are going to the World Series or the Cavs are in the playoffs or any of those things. So that gave me a greater appreciation when I came back here, and then I was a baseball writer at the Plain Dealer for 5 years,
People, but it was.
and then I went to the Beacon Journal for 22 years. I did the Cavaliers, became a columnist, and then I
Yeah.
came back to Cleveland with the Plain Dealer in 2007. But I knew that this is the market I should be in,
Yeah.
and part of it is to try and just you build up a name, and you want to write stuff that you, I don't write for me. I hopefully write for the readers, and
Yeah.
that's not always true of all writers. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times I'm a bigger baseball fan, for example, than Browns fan, just because
Mm-hmm.
we grew up in a baseball family. But the fact is, the readership for the Browns is enormous,
Yeah.
and a lot of people want to do that. And as a writer, I could write about most anything,
Mm-hmm.
so I do that. But also obviously work in the baseball and those things. But I just think that um, kind of being blessed to when I settled in, especially at the from at the Beacon Journal and was there 22 years, and then
Mm-hmm.
got a chance to come to the Plain Dealer. I knew that this is where kind of I wanted to go and end up. And Hal Leibowitz was also kind of a mentor to me growing up, and I got to know him later on. And I saw what a long career he had, and I thought, well, that's not bad. It beats working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess what inspires you to write every week? You kind of talked about it with, writing for the readers, but
Mm-hmm.
you write, your sports column, you write a faith column, you've written multiple books.
Well, a couple of things. Number one, my degree is actually secondary education,
Oh, wow.
social studies, minor in English.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was at Cleveland State working my way through, for a couple of years, I tutored in the inner city. First, I think the school's gone. John Raper Elementary was on Huff Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I tried to find it after I visited League Park the one time
Yeah.
because I thought it was either like 73rd and Huff or somewhere. I couldn't find it. So I think they knocked it down and made it into a learning center or something. So I was there for a year, and then I was on the near west side at a Catholic school for a couple of years, tutoring math when I was coming through. And then the big thing was to get certified to teach. I spent 6 weeks at a junior high in Parma
Mm-hmm.
teaching social studies, and then 6 months at Lincoln West.
Oh.
5 classes a day, 3 different preparations. One, it gave me enormous appreciation for really good teachers. Because the
Mm-hmm.
thing that's cool, like say I go and do my jail ministry, I'll go in on Wednesday. We'll have some guys in there. First of all, it's voluntary, so that helps their attitude. They're not forced to come. Secondly, I do it once. We're done in an hour, and I'm out of there. I don't have to do it again. That was the thing. We just have one class, and then well, that went pretty good. Here comes another group, and by about class number 5, I can't remember, did I tell that story? Just tell it twice, or I didn't tell it at all, or
Mm-hmm.
whatnot? Because I found it really demanding and draining, and I give them a lot of credit, those who have done it for a long time. Where I think probably on a college level, where you're teaching a few classes a week, that probably is a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But this is really demanding. In the meantime, I was writing too, but Reagan, I've written more
Yeah.
books than were in my house growing up, and that's
Wow.
not a knock on my parents.
Mhm.
They got the papers. They loved to read the paper and that,
Mhm.
but we just didn't have a lot with books. And so I knew that my dad worked at old Fisher Fazio's warehouse. I worked there going through school. I worked at my mother's bowling alley. That's where she worked. So I had like, as I would say, real jobs that I wanted to write. But
Mhm.
part of the reason of getting the secondary education degree is one, I thought, well, if it doesn't work, maybe go get a job teaching.
Mhm.
And I think that's a mistake that a lot of, I would want to say this, or some people out there think, well, gee, I want to go into sports management or
Mhm.
journalism. Make that be like your second degree, your minor or something.
Mhm.
Go get something you can use. A lot of these people want to go into sports management. So go get a business or marketing degree,
Mhm.
a minor in sports management. They spit those sports management people out all over the place. And if you look at the people who are, for example, in PR with
Mhm.
the Cavs or the Indians, they last forever. The
Mhm.
Browns don't, because they hired and fired a whole bunch of them like they did everybody else. But in general, they do. So that would be something I would suggest. And
Mhm.
and just like if you want to write, you got to go write. It isn't just. I think mass media is fine, but again, I would make all that stuff be a minor, and I would try to find something in a major field that if you have to go get a job, you go get a job.
Mhm. Yeah. Let me see. So obviously you met me when you came to the Baseball Heritage Museum to
Hmm.
get the picture of the death certificate from Ray Chapman. But what other resources do you tap into when researching for like your historical books, like your vintage calves or things like that?
Well, it's funny, like with vintage cabs, I'm getting to be so old. Just about a lot of it is. I'm going to look up stuff that I already wrote way back when,
Yeah.
or people that I know.
Hmm.
I mean, it is fun to look back. Like when I did Our Tribe, I remember I was looked up some stuff from the Sporting News in 1920, which back then was called the St. Louis Sporting News, and which was basically a baseball paper, and some others. And you just read. I remember I forgot what I was looking for, something from the 30s. There was a player named Joe Vosmick who lived in Cleveland,
Hmm.
and I forgot whether it was the press or plain dealer. They gave his home address.
Oh my gosh.
They said Joe Vosmick, who lives at 1812 East 27th Street or something. I was like, what?
No.
And I guess it was like, okay, that's how they did it back then. And there wasn't any thought, but boy, somebody's going to go over their house and rob them. Or it was a different. This is in the Depression too,
Yeah.
so it's fun to look at that stuff and see how it was covered. So
Hmm.
that's a really good thing. Now what I found as I've gotten older is, um, and this is a sad thing, because with so many layoffs in the newspaper business,
Hmm.
there's so many terrific journalists that frankly are looking for part-time work. I've hired researchers for several of my books, and they're digging up stuff for me. They're people that I've known from the newspaper business.
Hmm.
Larry Pantages from the Beacon Journal, and he actually was part of a Pulitzer Prize business writing team too there. um, that he's been the researcher in my last at the Vintage Calves and Brownstown. And so I've used him, and I've used some others too that really help because they're cross checking.
Hmm.
And you know what I found, Reagan, too? I'll tell you, you can have the great researchers and you can take your time. You always mess up one or two things. You just do.
Hmm.
It's almost like playing a game. I don't care. Even in a no hitter,
Yeah.
the pitcher probably get a couple bad pitches that the guy popped up or the line drive and almost knocked somebody's head off, but it got caught. So and you have to realize that there's nothing perfect. That was actually one of the themes of a faith column recently during especially during the pandemic, is really hard on
Yeah.
perfectionism.
Yeah. Speaking of, how has your job changed during this year, and what's your opinion on how it has changed?
Well, not too much this year, because people have asked my wife, "What's it like having your husband home all the time?" Well, I've been home most of the time from decades because I work from home, and then it's part of the reason I liked it. I don't have to be in the office. I mean, in the newspaper business, it sort of works like this: if you're producing a lot
Mm-hmm.
of stories, it's almost like in sales. They particularly don't really care how you get them, I mean, as long as it's legal and ethical. But I mean, if you want to write at 3 in the morning or whatever, as long as it's in on time, we don't care when it is. If
Mm-hmm.
you're not, then they want to see what you're doing. So
Right.
that's been it. And I think the fact that when I was in college, I worked at the Twinsburg Bulletin. I remember I was getting $20 a story, and I was freelancing all over the place. So I was really, the more I wrote, the more I got paid back then.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're working your way through school at Cleveland State, living at home, anything I could get over and above, rolling it in with the tutoring, rolling it in with sometimes at the warehouse,
Yeah.
it just kind of creates that. So writing a lot doesn't always make it better, but I'll tell you this, that's one thing, the internet age,
Yeah.
it's like, at least the paper, you could run out of space. You never run out of space on the internet,
Yeah.
and they always want more.
Mm.
So it's nice to have that. It's like I was like really impressed when I went out, because I was out to the museum twice,
Yes.
for some things, and to see what you guys have done there,
Mm-hmm.
and to remember. I actually don't remember if I sat on the bench that day or if I actually played in a game, but Benedictine, when I was there, and this would have been like 71 or somewhere, played a game. I think we played East Tech or East High there. And it was just so trashed all over. My father always talked about League Park. That's where he went to games.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, there were the needles by the where the stands still are.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, we were out there like picking up rocks and taking stuff off of there before the game began.
Yeah.
And it was just to see that and to see what it is now and to see how it's being used. And it's just terrific.
Yeah. Yeah, we do our best over there. So going back to how you research, what is the coolest or most significant artifact you've ever personally viewed that you've used to inform a piece that you've worked on?
Like artifact, huh?
Or like anything you stumbled upon and you're like, oh, that is really cool. I'm going to use that.
One of the things, and this came from talking to a whole lot of people, and it's not baseball oriented, but when I did the book, 64 Browns,
Yeah.
Brownstown 64, and I just assumed that when Paul Brown was fired by Art Modell, that the players couldn't have liked it or whatever, almost to a man.
Mm-hmm.
All those guys said, had Paul Brown not been fired, they didn't believe they would have won the 64 title, that he had become basically sort of a grumpy older coach, unhappy,
Yeah.
and sort of stuck in his ways. The innovator. That's what happens sometimes. I don't care if you're in writing or whatever. You get out ahead of everything and you start doing all this stuff, and it's innovative, but it keeps working for you. So you keep doing it over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly everybody else is doing it too. And not only that, they're figuring out ways to stop you, and you've not continued. It's just like in baseball. I have to admit, some of the changes in baseball drive me nuts. But the point was, they said that Blanton Collier, who was his longtime assistant, Paul Brown, that basically he was a nicer version of Paul Brown. He listened better, and then he would take some of their ideas and incorporate them into some of the Paul Brown basics. And I found that to be really, because I just didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
And guy after guy after guy told me that. So that's something you don't get out and talk to people. And you always have to watch, because there's, everybody has revisionist history. Probably there's some factual errors if people were to fact check what I just said about my own life, but it's how I viewed it.
Yeah.
But in general, if you have so many other people telling you this, then that's a thing there.
Yeah.
Regan, I wanted to ask you, when you guys started the museum, what did you think it was going to be?
So the museum has actually been in effect present since 1997. It actually started at the old arcade on Euclid. And then in 2014, we got the space we're in now at League Park from the city. And it is the original ticket house of League Park. So it is where, in 1910, this is where you would buy your tickets, and then you would enter into the park to watch a baseball game, be it the Indians or the Buckeyes or whoever it was. And I think that's really cool. I like that we're kind of a hub for, baseball history in Cleveland. And we have the Indians things. We have a lot of Negro League stuff, which I really appreciate. So I think it's just a place for us, when we started it, and the way I view it is that it's a place for us to showcase baseball history in Cleveland, because obviously League Park was such a big part of baseball history.
Well, I remember going down to the arcade, because that's what I thought it was. Vern Fuller, the former Indian player, it seems like he has something to do with it back then.
Hmm.
Forgot what it was. So we went through that. I actually wrote a story on that. This is a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I was thinking it's okay at the arcade, but you talk about sort of being tucked away,
Hmm.
um, traffic in that. And so when you were able to get the League Park thing, I mean that really helps. And um,
Hmm.
it's one of those things. I know some people, I'm worried about the neighborhood or whatever. Go there down there during the day. It's
Yeah,
fine.
it's fine.
Yeah, don't worry about it.
I
There's a
willingly go.
lot of places I don't want to go at night, period, not just there. So
Yeah, I
uh,
go there every week. It's fine.
yeah, it really is, and it is worth the time, and it's a
Mhm.
much better setting than when they were at the arcade.
We do our best over there with, just trying to showcase baseball history and the baseball history in Cleveland that isn't just.
You have things like 1920 World Series programs or any of that kind of stuff.
I don't know if we have any World Series programs, but we do right now have a whole exhibit on the 1920 World Series run.
Okay,
It's really fun. And we
best
have,
of nine, wasn't it?
yes, it was best of nine. And they went, I think one of their catchphrases was win it for Ray because obviously he had been killed earlier.
Right. It is because I went over the grave. They still put stuff, although
Mm.
the things at the graves, although some of those things need to be taken out of there.
Oh, no.
I mean, the bugs have gotten them and some other stuff, and it really, they need somebody should go over there and just kind of. It's time to do a redecorating, shall we say, of that. The
Yeah.
other thing that I found interesting when I forgot whether it was for a story in the
Hmm.
Beacon Journal way back when, or for my book Our Tribe, looking at the 20 World Series, is how coming after the 1919 fix,
Hmm.
how they were so worried about they can't have another scandal in the World Series. They needed a clean series, which is not something we would think about now.
Yes.
But it was a big deal because if you turned out that there's two in a row that are fixed,
Hmm.
your game is really then all of a sudden you might as well go have horse racing or something. I mean, it would have been a huge thing for baseball if
Hmm.
that had gone the wrong way.
Yes. If baseball had been fixed twice in a row, it would not have been good.
And there were some hints. There were a couple regular season games during that year that looked a little funny, but I'm not sure anything ever came of that.
Hmm.
But nobody, because they were watching those games really close in 20,
Yes, they were.
and nobody really thought anything other than the Indians were the best team, and that's kind of the way it went. And
Mhm. Yeah. Let me ask you a couple more questions, and then would you be interested in answering any questions that we have on the
sure,
Facebook?
if we get some from fans, that'd be great.
Yeah. So, let me think. So, with the World Series currently taking place and the NBA's bubble season finished with the Lakers as champions, what do you think the legacy will be for 2020 professional sports seasons?
TV shows,
TV shows, you think?
they're TV shows.
Yeah.
Um, they're made for TV, which I was pushing
Mhm.
sports to start up again once it became pretty clear that um, look, I'm 65 years old. I'm in the bullseye for COVID, even though I don't have any pre-existing conditions. The
Mhm.
Terry Francona is
Yeah.
in a mess for COVID.
Yeah.
Shane Bieber is not.
Mhm.
If you take those, a athlete between the ages of 18 and 30, physically conditioned, backed by Cleveland Clinic or UH hospitals,
Mhm.
um, and with trainers all over and everything else. If the person gets sick, as we've seen, I mean, they may get sick, but it's nothing like. And my mom, while she's not my bio mom, she's like my mom. She's in a nursing home. They're in quarantine again.
Mhm.
She's 94. That's a whole other deal. Or as I mentioned, Terry Francona with his variety of health conditions. I mean, the only guy in the Indians there was a concern on was Carrasco coming off
Right.
of leukemia. But so I think that they needed to get that back going because the fact that people are down and like the Browns winning right now, you know what it is? It's a nice diversion.
Yeah.
It really, like you said, you're an education aide and your school is closed and all. I mean, there's
Yes.
story after story like this,
Mhm.
and at least there's something again, a TV show to watch. Exactly what the titles mean, I don't know,
Mhm.
but I'm sure if Tampa Bay comes back to win it, or even if the Dodgers, who've been can't won once, I was surprised they haven't won one since '88.
Really?
Yeah, they've been there, but they keep losing.
Yeah.
And the other thing, how about this? The Indians and the Royals have been, and the Tigers, I believe, have all been to the World Series more recently than the Yankees.
Oh, wow.
I think the Yankees are 2010, the last time they went.
Yeah, I think you're right. I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, that's like when you have some fun with. I know that. Hey, what I always
Mhm.
say, money matters.
Yes.
Money counts. Money isn't everything, but money's something.
Hmm.
And that whether it's in our own life or running a team. But if it were everything, we'd have the Dodgers, Yankees, and Red Sox just playing in the World Series every year.
True.
I guess unless the Astros cheat their way in. I mean, take your pick. So I was so glad they fell apart. But I think that's what it'll just be. We'll look back at just a real weird time. And those of us who are around say, at least we had something on TV to watch if you wanted to watch basketball or baseball or
Mhm.
football.
Okay. Let me ask you a few fan questions. So let's
Okay.
see. One from Maria Ortiz says, "Can you talk?"
Maria. Hello, Maria. I know Maria. She's come to some of my book signings.
Yes, she would like you to talk about your mentor, Hal.
Oh, Hal Lebowitz. Yeah. And it's hard I want to say he died now like 12 or 13 years ago. Um, Basically, like if you see talking to myself, that column, Hal used to write these conversations with
Hmm.
fictional characters in a deli, and
Yes.
so they would do that. That was one of his techniques.
Hmm.
Another that he would do is, he wrote notes, about Terry's talking is just sort of a different version of that.
Hmm.
Uh, and also, I mean, Hal was very easy to read. Hal was a chemistry teacher and a coach, and he was a referee. I get these questions from people think I know the rules and the stuff like Hal, and I'm like, I don't know what happens if a seagull ate the ball, like sitting on the foul line. I don't know, but Hal always, even if he didn't know, he had an answer.
Hmm.
So, but the main thing with Hal was he was somebody that um, could get whether it be at the owners or the general managers on the phone. He kind of worked the front offices like I do.
Hmm.
And he also realized that personal attacks and name calling are not the way to go.
Yeah.
It's just not. Because now it's far more acerbic right now than then, but there were people back then that could really go at you and try to tear your throat out.
Yeah. Let me see. Did you ever? Yes, you said you played at League Park. Did you ever attend a game at League Park by like a professional team?
No, I'm
No,
older, not that old.
that's thought I'd ask. That was
No,
one
I
of the
didn't.
questions.
No, the
Somebody.
only game was that one at Benedictine and East High. I'm pretty sure is what it was, and I'm sure we won because Benedictine won most of the time, and it was a dreadful
Hmm.
thing. And that's the other thing. It's really nice. My alma mater, Benedictine, they play just up the road from you. They play Case Western now.
Yeah.
Our home field used to be was Luke Easter Park, and that was
Mhm.
another place that wasn't real pretty to play. So
Let me think. Let me think. Does your approach to writing about historical subjects differ from your writing on current sports teams?
I don't really is that from a reader or a
No,
listener?
that's just one of my last questions. Like, when you're writing your books, like Vintage Cabs or about the '64 Browns, do you write differently than you would write for like your columns or your sports
Oh
writing?
yeah, especially some of those because like they'd be more personal
Hmm.
there because people kind of like that style. Secondly, um, I I mean, some of these stories now I'm writing in 20 or 30 minutes. And
Yeah.
even on a day Browns game, they want that thing up really quick afterwards. So, because the internet, it's
Hmm.
basically you're always on deadline on the internet.
Yeah.
And so that's changed it. Where a book, you're not. So you have more time to think about. I have a researcher. Uh,
Hmm.
I could kind of write stories that I want to tell. The advantage of having a full-time job is my books could be on things that interest me. They don't, and I
Hmm.
want them to sell. And anybody says they don't care whether they sell or not, they should like immediately be checked for, whether their obviously say professional help is, prescribed
Yeah.
for. But it doesn't, my living doesn't depend on that,
Hmm.
as long as I got the paper / cleveland.com going.
Hmm. Okay, one more question from a fan, and then I believe we can wrap up if that's okay with you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Maria, one more question from Maria. What is your opinion on Commissioner Rob Manfred?
Oh boy. And it's like, I thought, well, he's actually inherited a lot of the sins of the other commissioners because
Hmm.
they've had chances to try and really get the union into some sort of salary cap situation or whatever. My goodness, they wiped out the '94 World Series, And you go back and look at that labor deal, I'm not sure what they got for it. I
Yeah.
mean, they did like when the NHL, I think they wiped out the Stanley Cup and that. They came back with a really good plan to help their middle and smaller markets.
Hmm.
Baseball didn't.
Hmm.
So, and now the union is so strong. And then secondly, I think, um, I mean, I like that he's looking at some of these different things. I don't know about you, Reagan. What do you think about the runner on second base?
Mm, not my favorite.
I liked it. I thought I'd hate it, but I kind of liked it. And um, again, you're probably even more of a traditionalist than I am, but
A little bit, yeah.
yeah. And the three batter rule,
Hmm.
I want to see this stuff over a full season. But
Yeah.
the reason I like the runner on second is just because it forces these guys to think whether I want to bunt or not.
Hmm.
It forces them to think basically with the type of game I grew up with, as opposed to now it's all launch angle and
Yeah.
14 guys on the right side of the infield and that. Um, so and we don't care about strikeouts.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. It's like when the Indians got Josh Naylor, it's like, oh, he doesn't really strike out that much. I looked it up. Well, by modern times, he does. He's still striking out like every 6 at bats, but
Hmm.
everybody else strikes out like every 3.5 at bats. So, he looks like, I mean, I think Joe DiMaggio struck out like 20 times the year he had the 56 game hitting streak. Or,
Yeah.
I mean, is kind of, it's one analytic thing that they completely ignore is this. If you don't hit a fair ball, you
Hmm.
don't get a hit.
True.
And but
True.
it's like, well, we don't care about strikeouts. Well, then, there. But so the commissioner, he's got it. This is going to be brutal, I think, coming up because he's going to be trying to negotiate a labor deal with the
Yeah.
union. Is not going to be real interested
Hmm.
in anything other than pressuring their players to get the most money. They don't care about the markets.
Hmm.
And then that was a problem with baseball. It moved so fast from trying to play under the virus to economics and name calling, and
Yeah.
they'll go right back there again.
Hmm.
I'm just glad they got the season in. I really am. That was very important.
Yeah. So one more question for me, and then we'll wrap up. Who,
Okay.
in your opinion, is the best Cleveland athlete right now across all three teams?
Ooh, well, probably the one who's going to leave is probably Lindor.
Yeah. Frankie's probably gonna leave.
Frankie, would be interesting to see him play basketball or play the other stuff too. He could probably play that.
He
Um,
probably could.
I, I'm trying to think right now in the Cavs.
Hmm.
There's no really terrific athlete. Sexton is probably a kid that could play a whole bunch of sports. Um, in football, um, you know, I they again they don't have that guy that you just think could be really
Hmm.
good at everything. So it probably is him. And the nice thing, I just think, baseball could really even things out because you
Hmm.
could be just a pure athlete in the other two sports, and they could find a role for you. In football, just run and catch a long pass. I
Hmm.
know you don't know any pass patterns or whatever. You could just go do that. Basketball, just jump, get a rebound, run down, jump, get a rebound, run, go back, run down. Or in football, you're really. I'm not saying they're unathletic because those big guys that weigh 300, 350 pounds clearly are for that size. They're athletes, but they're
Hmm.
not. They can get away with it. Baseball is pretty hard.
Yeah.
To do that. You have to do a number of things. The old saying about hitting the baseball is probably the hardest individual skill. I think that's true. I
Yeah.
really do. I think quarterback's the hardest position to play in team sports because you're so dependent. But um, it was an interesting discussion. It propped up in the press box yesterday
Hmm.
when Baker all of a sudden was playing very well. This is in Cincinnati, and we were talking about Joe Burrow, running really good. And this then flipped back to baseball. And then I said, well, I was talking to Paul DePodesta a number of years ago, and I've heard him say this elsewhere. And he said, when you have a great quarterback, it's like having your ace pitcher start every game. So it'd be like Shane Bieber pitching every game for the
Yeah.
Indians would be like if Baker ends up being really good. And because you have that, which the others, you can't do that in baseball. You need all this depth in the pitching staff. because he controls at least half of the game, just like a pitcher controls half the game. I never saw that connection.
Hmm.
And I think it's interesting that really, see Paul DePodesta, the baseball guy,
Hmm.
has risen Reagan and outlasted, sort of Sashi Brown and brought him in. And then he outlasted John Dorsey. And then he's kind of doubled back to it's now a baseball type front office
Hmm.
with him. He's a Harvard guy,
Yeah.
started in baseball. His assistant he brought in, I forgot what Ivy League this guy Quamsy Feely or something was from. And then
Yeah.
you have even Stefanski played at Penn, and Andrew Berry, while he has a scouting background from the Colts, was again a Harvard guy, just like the Indians of all these guys. So
Hmm.
it'd be fascinating to see how it works out. But he's a survivor. I realize too. You know what kind of job you need, Reagan?
What?
Chief strategy officer. That's what Paul is. It's kind of like you're over above all this stuff. If it doesn't quite go right, well, I recommended this. So you want to be chief strategy officer. That's my advice to you and everybody out there.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on with us for this. I'm going to plug some few things for the museum. So we are open Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday, 9 to 3. This week is especially fun because on October 30th and 31st, which is Friday and Saturday this week, we will have a treat, a trick or treat sort of boo at the museum where we're going to have games and candy and all sorts of fun things. Baseball costumes are always encouraged. So thank you very much, Terry. I hope to hear from you soon.
Okay, you take care. See you
Thank you.
later.
Bye-bye.